When Nikola Tesla was born during a lightning storm in 1856, the midwife declared it an omen that he would be a child of darkness. Our Makena Okonkwo came into this world during a total blackout, his mother clutching the last candle in their village to illuminate her makeshift delivery. Unlike Tesla, there was no midwife to prophesy his destiny. There was only the suffocating darkness that engulfed the village, and, ironically, it would be this cruel absence of electricity that would inspire Makena to create an invention that would forever change not just his life, but the lives of millions across the forgotten corners of Africa. Welcome to another haunting episode. If you're just beginning to follow our series on brilliant minds reshaping our world from the shadows, don't forget to hit subscribe and drop a like to help us spread these chilling tales of inspiration. And tell me in the comments, from what dark corner of the world are you watching the story of young Makena, our African prodigy? In the depths of a remote village in East Africa, a place modern maps barely acknowledge, Makena grew up in a world that seemed determined to crush his dreams. Unlike the tech titans like Jobs or Musk who had access to elite universities, Makena existed in a community where 83% of homes had never known the touch of electricity, and 67% of children abandoned education before they turned 12, swallowed by the relentless cycle of poverty. The son of Amara, a single mother who sold vegetables at the local market, Makena learned early that necessity truly is the architect of innovation. While other children played with sticks and stones, he spent hours dissecting broken radios and discarded devices scavenged from the local dump. This wasteland of forgotten technology, ironically, became his first university, a makeshift laboratory where twisted metal, tangled wires, and circuit boards whispered secrets of technologies he had never seen functioning in real life. By 8, when his friends could barely write their names, Makena had already constructed his first flashlight using materials others had thrown away. Amara, though illiterate, recognized the fire burning behind her son's eyes, the same intensity she saw in the stars that illuminated their nighttime conversations about impossible dreams. And she did the unthinkable to keep him in school, even when it meant going to bed hungry herself. The only science book in the tiny community library, torn and missing half its pages, became Makena's most precious possession. It was a basic manual on physics and electricity from the 1970s, with faded illustrations of circuits and explanations of electromagnetism that he memorized by candlelight, night after night, while his neighbors mocked the crazy boy who believes in lights without fire. While Tesla grew up in 19th century Europe, where despite limitations there existed a tradition of scientific pursuit, Makena faced the 21st century without even the most basic resources. No internet, no mentors, no laboratories. What most would see as a death sentence for potential, he transformed into a challenge. "Darkness is not my enemy," Makena would say. "It simply shows me exactly what needs fixing." When a devastating drought descended upon his village and hunger spread like a plague, everything changed. At just 12 years old, watching Amara grow sick under the feeble light of a candle and his community wither without power for even the most basic necessities, Makena conceived the idea that would place him on the global map of innovation. An idea that, like Tesla's revolution of energy distribution, would defy the laws of impossibility and prove that sometimes the brightest lights emerge from the darkest places. The drought that ravaged Makena's village brought more than just hunger and thirst. Like all great catastrophes, it carried within its devastation the seeds of opportunity. With Amara growing weaker by the day, Makena knew he needed to do more than just dream about circuits and batteries in his tattered notebook. It was on a scorching Tuesday when fate came knocking. The generator at the local clinic, the only one in the entire village, finally gave out. The small refrigerator storing vital vaccines and medicine for the community had mere hours before everything spoiled. In a place where medicine was already scarce, this wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a potential death sentence. "If anyone can fix it, we'll pay with food," announced Jabari the nurse, desperation cracking his voice. The village elders tried their hand poking and prodding at the noisy, smoking machine, but none could decipher its mysteries. "I can try." Makena's voice was barely a whisper, nearly lost among the concerned murmurs. The adults laughed, dismissing him instantly. "Go home, boy. This isn't a toy." But Amara, despite her weakness, rose to defend her son. "Let him try," she challenged. "What more do we have to lose?" With small but steady hands, Makena opened the generator while everyone watched, skepticism written across their faces. His fingers moved as if they were having a conversation with the machine's components. No manual, no instructions, guided only by knowledge absorbed from that old torn book and the broken devices from the dump site. "The problem is here." He pointed to a part no one present could even name. "The spark isn't happening because these wires are corroded." Using scraps of metal and wire he always carried in his pockets, a habit that had earned him mockery, Makena worked for 2 grueling hours under the merciless sun. When he finally connected the last cable, silence fell over the crowd that had gathered around him. A click, a rumble. And then, like dark magic, the generator roared back to life. The news spread through the village like wildfire. The boy who fixed the generator. Amara's son who could speak to machines. This wasn't just a repair. It was nothing short of a miracle for people who lived in perpetual darkness. Ibrahim, the schoolteacher who had abandoned his own dreams of becoming an engineer to teach in this forgotten village, was particularly moved by the story. The following day he sought out Makena. "How did you know what to do?" he asked, his eyes gleaming with a curiosity long dormant. Makena shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. I see how things work inside my head. Like I can take them apart and put them back together up here." He tapped his temple. In that moment, Ibrahim recognized what no one else had seen. Makena wasn't merely intelligent or curious, he thought differently. He saw patterns invisible to others. He possessed that rare spark that all great inventors carry. The ability to see solutions where others see only broken pieces and insurmountable problems. "I have something for you," Ibrahim said, handing the boy an old notebook with a worn leather cover. "Write down your ideas, all of them." That notebook, gifted in a moment of desperation, would transform not only Makena's life, but the destiny of his entire community. As the village celebrated the fixed generator, no one imagined this was merely the first step in an extraordinary journey that would eventually echo across continents. Makena had found his purpose. And with that battered notebook clutched to his chest, he began sketching his most ambitious dream, to bring permanent light to the darkness that had swallowed his village whole. That notebook from Professor Ibrahim quickly became Makena's most faithful companion. Its once empty pages now overflowed with sketches, simple equations, and wild ideas that made sense to him alone. He slept with it, tucked beneath his pillow, and would jolt awake in the darkness to scribble down dreams that felt like solutions from another world. Amara's health improved somewhat after the clinic resumed operations, but life in the village remained brutal and unforgiving. Each night, as shadows devoured their tiny home, Makena watched his mother struggle to sew by the pitiful light of a single candle, desperately trying to earn extra money. Her eyes would burn, her fingers often bleeding from needle pricks she could barely see coming in the insufficient light. "Don't worry, son," Amara would smile, masking her pain. "Our lives have always been this way." These words hammered against Makena's consciousness. Why did their lives have to be this way? Why? Was darkness accepted as their inescapable fate? One scorching afternoon, while scavenging through the dump site, Makena discovered something different. A small, broken solar panel, discarded from some failed humanitarian project that never truly functioned. It was cracked and coated in dust, but something about it captured his attention like nothing before. He carried the panel home and spent days studying it obsessively, trying to decode how it transformed sunlight into power. In his notebook, he meticulously sketched each component, each connection. During daylight hours, he positioned the fractured panel beneath the merciless sun and measured the output with an ancient multimeter Ibrahim had loaned him. "It works, even broken," he whispered to himself, eyes wide with realization. "But it's not powerful enough. It was on a moonless night, nearly 3 months after receiving the notebook, when everything changed. Amara coughed so violently that she knocked over their only candle. The darkness that followed was immediate and absolute, a suffocating void. "Don't move, Mother," Makena said, fumbling blindly through the blackness. "I'll light another." But there were no more candles, no matches, nothing but darkness and the sound of Amara's labored breathing cutting through the night. Makena sank to the floor, frustration flowing as silent tears down his face. His fingers brushed against the broken solar panel and the small dynamo he had salvaged from an abandoned bicycle. And then, like lightning slicing through the night sky, the idea struck him with almost physical force. "What if," he whispered, his heart pounding against his ribs, "what if I could store the sunlight? Not just use it when the sun shines, but save it for when we need it most." That night, guided only by starlight filtering through their small window, Makena drew frantically in his notebook. This wasn't just a solar panel. This wasn't just a battery. This was an entire system. Simple, cheap, and constructed from materials that could be found in any dump site across Africa. He pounded on Ibrahim's door before the sun had even breached the horizon. "I found it," he said, his eyes glowing, brighter than any electric light. "I found a way to capture the sun itself." The teacher examined the drawings, initially bewildered, then utterly astounded. What Makena had conceived wasn't merely an adaptation of existing technology. It was a complete reimagining of how solar energy could be harvested, stored, and distributed using discarded materials that others had thrown away. "This isn't just an idea, Makena," Ibrahim said, his voice thick with emotion. "This could change everything." And so, in that humble shack, the Sun Life system was born. An invention that would one day illuminate not just a village, but ignite an energy revolution across an entire continent forgotten by the modern world. The fire in Makena's eyes as he presented Sun Life to Ibrahim quickly collided with its first enemy: cold, harsh reality. Drawings in a notebook were one thing, but transforming them into something tangible was an entirely different beast. "We need materials, tools, money," Ibrahim explained, scratching his head while examining the list of necessary components, his optimism fading with each item he read. Makena's throat tightened. Money was something his family had never known. Amara could barely afford food, let alone parts for what most would call a mad child's fantasy. "We'll present your project to the village council," Ibrahim suggested, a last desperate hope. "Perhaps they can help us." The meeting was set for the following Sunday. Makena barely slept for days, rehearsing his explanation, simplifying it so even the oldest elder could grasp the concept. In his mind, they would see what he saw: salvation through light. When the fateful day arrived, the boy's heart hammered against his ribcage like a prisoner demanding release. Chief Kwame, respected by all, eyed with naked suspicion the scrawny 13-year-old who dared propose a solution that educated engineers hadn't managed to create. "Amara's son thinks he'll save our village?" Whispers and mocking laughter echoed through the small community hall, cutting through Makena's confidence like knives. "Let the boy speak," Kwame ordered, more out of respect for Ibrahim than any belief in Makena's abilities. With a voice trembling at first but gradually finding strength, Makena explained his system. He used simple words, clear drawings. He detailed how Sun Life could function with materials they already had access to, how it could be assembled by anyone with hands willing to work. When he finished, the silence hung heavy as a shroud. "Pretty pictures," finally said one of the elders, his voice dripping with dismissal. "But we are poor. We have no money for dreams." "And who will teach us to build this?" "You?" asked another, sarcasm coating his words. "A boy who hasn't even finished school?" Ibrahim tried to defend Makena, but the decision was unanimous and brutal. There would be no support from the village. On the walk home, silent tears streamed down the young inventor's face. But these weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of wounded determination, the kind that harden rather than weaken resolve. "I'll build it myself," he told Ibrahim, his jaw set firm. "I'll prove it works. In the months that followed, Makena became something of a ghost at the dump site. He would appear before dawn and leave only when darkness fell. Every piece of metal, every wire, every discarded battery was analyzed, cleaned, tested. His once soft hands became calloused and frequently bore cuts that never fully healed before new ones appeared. At school, his grades plummeted. Some teachers complained he slept during lessons. Others suggested he was wasting his time with technological fantasies instead of learning practical skills for a boy of his station. "Perhaps you should quit school and help your mother at the market," suggested one teacher with thinly veiled contempt. Not everyone was born to study. These words cut deeper than the scrap metal at the dump. Each night, Makena questioned himself. Was he merely dreaming too big? Was he chasing moonlight? It was Amara who kept him anchored. One night, finding him crying over his marked-up notebook, she held his face between her weathered hands. "When you were born during that blackout, I promised your life would be filled with light," she said, her eyes gleaming with unshakable certainty. "Don't give up on your son, my son. It will rise." With his mother's words nourishing his soul, Makena returned to his work with renewed purpose. If the village didn't believe in him, if the school didn't support him, if the world doubted, it didn't matter. He had his notebook, his hands, and the unwavering faith of Amara and Ibrahim. And nearly 6 months after the council's rejection, in a hidden corner behind Ibrahim's modest home, the first prototype of Sun Life began taking form, a silent rebellion against the darkness that had ruled their lives for generations. The small shed behind Ibrahim's home transformed into Makena's sanctuary. There, away from the skeptical eyes of the village, the Sun Life prototype took shape day by day. Carefully bent metal pieces formed a framework that tracked the sun's path. Salvaged and patched photovoltaic cells captured every possible ray. But most impressive was his series of modified batteries that stored energy more efficiently than systems costing thousands of dollars. "It's not pretty," Makena admitted, wiping sweat from his brow while adjusting the final connections. "But it doesn't need to be." Ibrahim watched with a mixture of pride and astonishment. What made Sun Life special wasn't just capturing solar energy. Other systems already did that. It was how he accomplished everything with discarded materials, and how anyone, even without education, could assemble it following simple diagrams. "It's ready," Makena whispered one Saturday afternoon after 3 failed attempts. The small LED light connected to the system illuminated and remained steady, powered by energy stored throughout the day. A light. A simple light. To most, nothing special. To Amara's household, it meant everything. That night, for the first time in years, Amara sewed without straining her eyes, without burning her fingers on the candle flame. She finished her work in half the time, able to accept more orders. Makena studied late into the night, no longer fearing the waste of precious candles. A week later, Ibrahim convinced Makena to install the system in the small community library. Children could now study after sunset. Adults held night meetings to discuss village problems without relying on battery-powered flashlights that always seemed to die at critical moments. "How does it really work?" asked a younger girl, curiously, touching the improvised panel. Makena explained with elegant simplicity, "The sun is like a river of energy. The panel is our bucket to catch that energy. And these batteries I modified are like our jars to store water for when the river dries up at night." Word spread to neighboring villages like wildfire. 1 month later, 5 families had their own Sun Life units assembled under Makena's guidance. The defining moment came when the local health center faced yet another generator failure. With Sun Life installed, vaccines didn't spoil, equipment kept running, and the first child born under Makena's light came into the world without complications during a nighttime delivery. Chief Kwame, the same man who had ridiculed the idea months earlier, appeared at Amara's doorstep one Sunday morning, the weight of humility evident in his posture. The village council would like to discuss the, Sun Life? The meeting that followed wasn't about criticism, but planning. Neighboring villages wanted their own units. A cooperative formed to collect materials. Young people begged to learn from Makena. "I don't understand how nobody thought of this before," remarked an elderly woman, shaking her head while observing the steady light illuminating the community center. "Because it took someone who lived in darkness to truly value the light," Amara replied, tears glistening in her eyes. What no one in the small village could possibly imagine was that a foreign visitor, a volunteer doctor passing through the region, took photos of the improvised system and shared them online with a simple caption: 14-year-old African boy reinvents solar energy with trash. The world needs to know Makena Okonkwo. The internet did the rest. Within 48 hours, Sun Life and its young creator were about to leap from a forgotten village into the global spotlight. The volunteer doctor's post was nothing elaborate. Just 4 blurry photos of Sun Life, one showing Makena explaining the system to village children with that simple caption. But sometimes the simplest stories cut deepest into the human heart. Within 3 days, the post had been shared over 500,000 times. In a week, it had been translated into 28 languages. Comments flooded the internet. "This kid built with garbage what billion-dollar corporations couldn't achieve with millions. Who is this boy, and how can we help him?" It was Zuri Mwangi, a journalist from Kenya Tech, who first made the comparison that would change everything. "Today, I met Makena Okonkwo, whom I can only describe as Africa's new Tesla. Like Tesla, the last century. This boy is revolutionizing access to energy with solutions the corporate giants ignore because they're too simple." The village that once barely existed on maps suddenly found itself invaded by journalists, cameras, and curious onlookers. Makena, who had never given an interview in his life, was now speaking with reporters from every corner of the globe. "How does it feel being compared to Nikola Tesla?" asked an American journalist, thrusting a microphone into his face. Makena, bewildered, looked at Ibrahim. "Who is Nikola Tesla?" This honest response, from a genius who didn't even know the name of the inventor he was being compared to, went even more viral. The next day, packages began arriving. Books about Tesla, electronic components, scholarship offers from institutions Makena had never heard of. Amara, terrified by her son's sudden fame, hesitated at each new opportunity. "What if they only want to exploit his ideas?" she whispered to Ibrahim, protective instincts flaring. It was an email from Jamal Nkosi, a renowned Kenyan inventor and founder of the African Innovation Foundation, that changed everything. He didn't offer money or fame. He offered something far more valuable: mentorship. "You don't need to leave Africa to change the world. I can help protect your idea and expand it the right way." With Nkosi's guidance, Sun Life was patented with one non-negotiable condition from Makena. The basic technology would remain open source for use in impoverished communities. Only the advanced commercial versions would be licensed. 6 months after the viral post, Makena stepped onto the stage at the African Technology Summit in Nairobi. His legs trembled so violently that Amara had to hold his hand until the final moment. "I only have 5 minutes," he whispered to his mother, terror etched across his face. "5 minutes is enough time to change the world," she replied. On stage, facing scientists, entrepreneurs, and investors, the 14-year-old boy who rarely left his village explained how Sun Life worked. He used no complicated technical terms. He didn't try to sound smarter than he was. He spoke with the same simplicity he used when explaining to children in his village. Electricity shouldn't be a luxury. It should be like air, available to everyone. The audience gave him a standing ovation that lasted nearly 10 minutes. It was at this event that the title, "The New Tesla," was cemented. As Dr. Mateo Santos, a science historian present at the event, explained, "Tesla dreamed of wireless energy for all mankind. He was ridiculed. He died poor despite his genius. What Makena has done echoes Tesla not just in ingenuity, but in the social vision of technology. Energy for everyone, not just those who can afford to pay." While companies fought to commercialize versions of Sun Life, the original invention spread from village to village through community workshops. A movement called Children of the Sun emerged spontaneously. young Africans replicating and adapting Makena's system for their local realities. MIT offered a full scholarship. European universities sent invitations. Major tech companies proposed multi-million-dollar contracts. But, to the world's surprise, Makena refused to immediately leave his country. Instead, he accepted online classes and distance mentoring while continuing to develop sun life in Africa. Tesla had to leave his homeland to be recognized, he explained in an interview with Time, which featured him on the cover as the inventor, illuminating Africa. I want to show we can create revolutionary technology right here, where it's needed most. In just 1 year, more than 2,000 Sun Life units were operating across 5 African countries. And the boy who was born during a blackout was now globally known as the young man who was, quite literally, illuminating an entire continent. The comparison to Tesla was no longer just about genius. It was about shifting paradigms of how energy can transform entire societies from the ground up. 5 years have passed since the world first met Makena Okonkwo. The scrawny 14-year-old boy has transformed into a young man of 19. Taller, broader in the shoulders, but still carrying that same curious gaze that sees solutions where others perceive only problems. His birth village, once forgotten on maps, has transformed. Not into a tourist attraction or metropolis, it remains an African rural community. But now it pulses with a different energy, both literally and figuratively. Every home has electricity. The local clinic doesn't just operate 24 hours. It offers procedures once unimaginable in this forgotten corner of the world. The school, now expanded, houses the country's first community innovation center, where children as young as 6 learn the principles behind sun life. On a sweltering summer afternoon, Makena walks between workbenches at the center, watching a group of girls dismantling and reassembling solar panels with the same curiosity he once had at their age. "Professor Makena," calls Zola, a 10-year-old girl with colorful braids, "I modified the system to work even during heavy rainfall. Want to see?" He smiles, remembering when no one called him Professor, when he was just Amara's crazy son. Sun life now exists in more than 30 variations, adapted for different climates and needs. From the floating version used in riverside communities to the ultra-compact model for refugees. All follow Makena's original principle: accessible materials, simple assembly, shared knowledge. "You know what's most remarkable about your invention?" a BBC reporter once asked him. "That it works," Makena replied with his characteristic simplicity. "No, that you didn't lock it behind an inaccessible patent. You democratized solar energy when you could have become a billionaire." In truth, Makena isn't poor. The foundation he created receives royalties from commercial versions of Sun Life sold in developed countries. But the basic technology remains. The open source, a gift to the world that needed it most. On this special night, Amara prepared a dinner to celebrate the anniversary of the first prototype. Ibrahim, now principal of the local school, brought the old notebook where it all began. "Remember when you told me you'd found a way to capture the sun?" Ibrahim asked, thumbing through the yellowed pages with childish but surprisingly precise drawings. Makena nodded, feeling the sweet weight of memory. "What no one realized," Ibrahim continued, "is that you didn't just capture the sun, you captured hope itself." It was true. Sun Life's greatest impact couldn't be measured in watts or saved dollars. It was measured in babies born with proper medical care, in students who could learn after sunset, in small businesses flourishing in villages once condemned to darkness, and perhaps most importantly, in the movement it had unleashed. The Makena effect, as newspapers called it, inspired over 200 young African inventors to develop solutions for local problems. A 12-year-old Ethiopian girl created a water purification system using discarded materials. 15-year-old twins in Ghana developed an app connecting small farmers directly to buyers, eliminating predatory middlemen. "You opened a door no one knew existed," said Jamal Nkosi, his mentor, during a conference. You showed that African problems can have African solutions, created by African minds. The Tesla comparisons continued, but with one crucial difference. While Tesla died alone and unrecognized, Makena flourished surrounded by a community growing alongside him. On the Sun Life Foundation website, a counter showed in real time how much carbon dioxide was no longer being emitted thanks to installed systems. Beside it, another counter, how many inventions had been inspired by the open innovation model Makena championed. True genius isn't about creating something complicated that no one understands, Makena explained in his TED Global Talk. It's about simplifying the complex so everyone can use it. When he finished his celebration dinner, Makena led his mother outside. The African sky, splashed with stars, shone over the village now dotted with warm, comforting lights. "Remember what you told me when I almost gave up?" he asked, holding Amara's hand. "Don't give up on your son. It will rise." Amara smiled, silent tears streaming down her face marked by time and struggle. "I was wrong," she said softly. "It wasn't just one sun that would rise. It was thousands." Below them, stretching as far as the eye could see, small points of light emanated from every house, every school, every clinic, like stars fallen from heaven to earth. The revolution that began in a tattered notebook had become a constellation of possibilities. And perhaps that's the true lesson of Makena's story. The greatest breakthroughs rarely come from billion-dollar laboratories or isolated geniuses. They emerge when necessity meets imagination, when knowledge is shared rather than hoarded, and when someone looks at an age-old problem with eyes that refuse to accept that things have always been this way. Like Tesla before him, Makena had changed how the world thinks about energy. But unlike Tesla, he ensured his light didn't shine alone, but ignited thousands of others. And so we reach the end of Makena Okonkwo's extraordinary journey, the African boy genius who became known as the new Tesla. A story that reminds us that brilliance doesn't discriminate by zip code, social class, or perfect conditions to flourish. What? Did you think of this dark tale of innovation against all odds? Can you imagine how many Makenas exist around the world right now, simply waiting for their chance, a tattered notebook, or someone who believes in their impossible dreams? If this narrative touched something deep within you or sparked even the smallest flame of inspiration, hit that like button so we can share it with more souls searching for meaning in the darkness. Every new subscriber helps us continue unearthing stories like this one, of extraordinary individuals who rarely stand in the spotlight, yet are silently reshaping our collective future from the shadows. Tell me in the comments what struck you most about Makena's story. Was it his relentless persistence in the face of crushing obstacles? The way he shared his knowledge instead of hoarding it like a dragon's treasure? Or perhaps how his deceptively simple invention solved a problem that billion-dollar corporations conveniently ignored? Until our paths cross again in the darkness, remember this. Sometimes the brightest lights emerge from the blackest voids. And who knows, the next great inventor might be watching this video right now, their fingers hovering over a keyboard or pencil, waiting for their own spark of inspiration to ignite. Thank you for walking this shadowy path with us. We'll be waiting for you in the next story, where another untold tale lurks in the darkness.